Here's the uncomfortable truth. The choke point was built by geology and empire for denial. Islands like Perim and the Hanish Group are tripwires, headlands are lookouts. Even the wind and current funnel traffic into lanes that tire crews and simplify targeting. We've been relying on speed, height and distance since the piracy era. But speed is capped by fuel and hulls, height doesn't stop sea skimmers, and distance collapses when drones can loiter longer than your patience. Convoys keep sailing because the alternative is admitting the gate can't be guaranteed. If navies step back, insurance collapses. If insurance collapses, trade detours. If trade detours, costs rise and time stretches. So we pretend. We stack escorts, add jammers, and rename old strategies as new operations. The bill still arrives. What nobody wants to say out loud is this: coverage gaps are policy. An escort can't erase shoreline politics or the supply chains feeding launch crews. As long as fuel, parts, targeting data, and legitimacy flow ashore, the threat regenerates faster than a task force can kill it. You can push risk north or south, from day to night, from lane to lane. You can't push it away. And that's the lie. Safety isn't a formation, it's a system. Asymmetric warfare learned the map. Now it's rewriting the toll. Meanwhile, the receipt in your hand is the only part of the Red Sea you'll ever touch. Night watch used to mean horizon, stars, and the slow thrum of engines. Now it's a guessing game with your pulse. Decks go dark, radios whisper. Everyone's learned the sound, thin metallic like a mosquito with a battery. Get this, some crews tape over glowing buttons, wedge mugs indoors so they don't clink, and walk soft on steel. When the radar paints a sudden blip, hands don't reach for binoculars first. They reach for the nearest bulkhead. A helmsman told me he started naming the hours. 2 a.m. is propeller hum, 3 is AIS ghosts, 4 is the buzz, no heroics, just small decisions, change bearing 5 degrees, vary speed by half a knot, keep the stack angled to break a heat signature. He said the first time the jammers crackled, it felt like someone squeezing the air out of the bridge. Meanwhile, Suez pilots measure life in delays. They dress for dawn, then wait until noon. A 40-minute hold becomes 4 hours. The tower calls, standby. The pilot boat leans into chop while tea goes cold. Every slip in the schedule steals sleep from the next shift. Pay is tied to moves. Moves are tied to timetables. When convoys stretch, overtime doesn't feel like a bonus. It feels like a tax on nerves. Unknown to most of us, Djibouti's stevedores live in the gaps. When schedules disintegrate, a shift evaporates. No berth, no crane call, no meal ticket. A man named Halim keeps his gloves in a plastic bag under his chair, because if the foreman waves, he has to sprint. He hasn't fixed his radio because calls are rare now, and you hear them before you see them. A stampede of boots across the yard when a container stack finally moves. Out on Yemen's coast, fishermen read the water like a second language. Or they did. The inlet that meant sardines now means something else when radar lines appear and disappear. A boy points at the shoreline where a cousin used to cast nets and says, "Not today." The boat sits higher in the water, fuel sloshing in a half-full jerry can. A catch missed on Monday is a meal missed on Thursday. Here's where this lands in your kitchen. A family budget in Cairo or Delhi or Naples starts to look like a manifest. Milk is up a little. Medicine copay nudges higher. A box with school shoes arrives late, then costs more. The receipt doesn't say Bab el-Mandeb, but it might as well. Freight surcharges don't announce themselves. They show up as quiet roundups. 0.49 to 0.59, 2.99 to 3.29. Micro story, mid-Gulf of Aden, a captain gets the call, reroute south, Cape it. His daughter's 8th birthday is Saturday. He promised video at noon. He counts days, then counts again. 14 extra. The bonus clause in his contract only triggers if he hits Rotterdam by the 28th. He'll miss it by 3. He records the birthday song anyway, in a stairwell because it's the only place quiet, and sends it on a patchy satellite link. She writes back with a drawing, a big orange ship and a tiny cake. Inside a clinic 2 time zones away, an insulin cooler ticks toward warm. The shipment was supposed to arrive on Tuesday. It's Friday. The nurse reorders half the list by phone, then tells a father to come back tomorrow and hopes it's true. Cold chain is a promise more than a technology. When the Red Sea stutters, the needle moves on a dial you never see. Sometimes it's only a degree. Sometimes that's enough. Meanwhile, the people who never chose a side carry the steepest risk. A pilot boat crew off Ras Issa decides to stand down for a week. Mortgage due, school fees due. One man's cousin took a fragment in his shoulder last month from a near miss and still comes to the pier every dawn just in case the foreman points. He smiles like he's fine. He's not. To understand why this hurts now, we need to go back to how this gate was built to hurt. The name always warned us, Gate of Tears. The map gave the rest. To understand why this hurts now, we need to see how this gate was built to hurt. Bab el-Mandeb didn't earn Gate of Tears from poetry. Sailors told stories of sudden winds that shoved dhows onto rocks, of fog that hit ashore until the keel felt it. But the tears weren't only weather. Empires saw a hinge and reached for it. Ottomans taxed the hinge, then Portuguese caravels probed it on their way to break the spice routes. When the British took Aden in 1839, they didn't call it conquest, they called it coaling. Steam needed coal and coal needed a lung. Aden became that lung ironclads inhaled there, then exhaled north. The day the Suez Canal opened in 1869, the geometry snapped into place. The Red Sea stopped being a long detour and became the artery itself. The Strait turned into the rib that could break it. Egypt understood, so did the Ethiopians across the water, and so did anyone who could park a gun on high ground. The islands, Perim, Little and Great Hanish, weren't scenic. They were tripwires. You could watch a fleet pass and decide which hull mattered. Colonial cartography ignored literal tribes who never ignored the water. Lines on maps met lines of sight. The water kept its own borders. Then 1973. While the world watched tank battles in Sinai, the choke played its part. The Arab oil embargo was the headline, but the sea made it felt. The Bab tightened, the Suez was already shut from 1967, and convoys crept. Insurance clauses were tested, navies learned the ritual of escorts in narrow seas. From 1973 to 1975, the world relearned that a hinge can grind. By the mid-200s, a new lesson arrived from skiffs. Piracy off Somalia was a reminder. In tight waters, speed, height, and distance beat firepower. Masters pushed knots higher, hung coils of razor wire, built citadels behind steel doors. Helicopters could chase, but the real defense was geometry. Keep small boats at arm's length, make the climb impossible, outrun the boarding ladder. It worked, until a new arsenal didn't need to climb at all. Meanwhile, Yemen's coast never stopped mattering to people who didn't own maps. Tribes fished and smuggled along inlets known by family names, not coordinates. Colonial borders split kin, ports were leased to distant capitals, and legitimacy, who gets to tax, who gets to protect, was negotiated on the pier, not in a parliament. When the Yemeni state fractured, the shoreline didn't. Whoever held the villages and wadis facing the lane could see, count, and signal. Here's where historical irony bites. The very infrastructure built to keep the artery open made it easier to close. Coal gave way to bunkering, bunkering to containerization, containerization to schedules that run like clockwork. Clocks make ambushes easier. The canal's expansion allowed bigger ships. Bigger ships have fewer options. Draft turned flexibility into predictability. And one more precedent sits like a quiet warning. The convoys of the 197s taught attackers and defenders the same lesson. Escorts reduce petty theft. They don't erase intent. When the intent is strategic, economic leverage, political pressure, missiles and mines stand in for skiffs and hooks. The playbook just got cheaper. What nobody knew at the time was how modern tech would democratize denial. Satellites that once served superpowers now sell images by the square kilometer. Radios gave way to AIS beacons that report a ship's soul every few seconds. Jammers twist those beacons. One-way attack drones follow heat, wake, or a last ping. The cost line flipped. Dollars for navies, thousands for attackers. History wrote the template, technology cut the price. So the name stuck, Gate of Tears, not because sailors were sentimental, but because every era found a new way to squeeze the hinge. Empires taxed it, states militarized it, pirates gamed it, now asymmetric warfare codes it. The map didn't change, our tools did, and the hinge still answers to whoever can make a captain lift a finger off the throttle and wait. The Strait's cruel design. Geography as weapon isn't a metaphor here, it's the operating system. The Bab el-Mandeb narrows into two corridors split by Perim Island, an upper lane skirting Yemen, a lower brushing Djibouti and Eritrea. Each lane is framed by headlands and ridgelines that rise just enough to turn binoculars into targeting tools. Put a spotter with a tablet on a promontory, and the sea below becomes a chessboard. Ships file through on rails because depth dictates behavior. The seabed writes the schedule. Perim and the Hanish chain work like natural tripwires. Thermal plumes from stacks stand out at night, wakes red like signatures under moonlight. In those hours, crews feel it most. Night favors the hunter in tight water. You can darken decks and kill every glow on the bridge, but your hull still displaces current, your engines still bleed heat. A one-way drone or sea skimmer doesn't ask for permission from your blackout discipline, it listens to physics. Wind and current join the ambush. This is a funnel. Northeast monsoon, southwest monsoon, either way, the set and drift compress traffic into familiar arcs. Masters compensate, rudders flick, but each correction reveals intent. Fatigue creeps faster here. Hands steering on the edge of a shoal for hours, eyes flicking between ECDIS and a radar screen peppered with clutter, while chatter spikes about a blip that may be a fishing skiff or a decoy. The mental load isn't a story flourish, it's the gap where mistakes live. Depth makes the trap tight. Ultra-large container ships and fully laden crude carriers can't improvise. They require under-keel clearance that forces them into the deepest ribbons of water. Those ribbons bend around headlands and through gates with names pilots repeat like prayers. Predictable means targetable. In open ocean, you can yaw, give up time to gain uncertainty. Here, deviation risks grounding, and grounding is a slow-motion catastrophe nobody can escort you out of. Here's where it gets interesting. Satellites don't sleep, and they don't need a navy. Commercial imaging passes paint ship positions often enough that good enough targeting becomes affordable. Combine that with AIS, even when masked or spoofed, and the picture sharpens. A seeker doesn't need a bullseye, it needs a neighborhood. Close counts when your goal is market impact, not a perfect kill chain. Perches matter. Coastal high ground places passive sensors above the sea clutter, letting cheap receivers catch radar side lobes and incidental emissions. A handheld radio on a ridge can cue a launch site tucked in a wadi. Caves and wadis form ready-made hideouts. Launch crews can move fuel and airframes under tarps by day, roll them out at night, and be gone before dawn. You aren't hunting a fleet, you're chasing a pattern on a coastline that breathes. Currents braid with wind to create crossing moments attackers prefer. When a convoy slows to keep spacing through a turn, everything compresses, radar returns stack, escorts split attention, and one lagging vessel becomes the soft joint. Escorts can't be everywhere. The arithmetic is cruel. Hundreds of miles of lane, a handful of high-value targets, and a defender who has to be perfect. The attacker picks the clock and the angle. Draft locks timing. A VLCC with 20+ meters under keel must hit the gate at tide windows, often aligning with narrow night bands to reduce detection. That creates a metronome. If you're watching from shore, you don't need a timetable, you need the moon and a tide chart. The sea tells you when the prize will pass, and it will pass where depth says it must. Meanwhile, the islands cut sightlines just enough to breed doubt. A headland gives false cover for a moment, then spits a ship back into view. That stutter is where ambush planning lives, a last cue, a final check, a launch decision. Thermal contrast is stronger against cool water after midnight. Engines running hotter under load glow brighter on infrared. Here, night gives both sides different gifts, but the shoreline hands the better one to the hunter. Height once meant safety. Big bridges towering 50 meters above the waves gave crews visibility pirates couldn't match. Against sea skimmers and loitering munitions, height just increases anxiety. You see more and you can do less. A ship can yaw a few degrees, goose speed within limits, throw chaff or spoofers if fitted, but its operating envelope is narrow. The shoreline's envelope is huge. Shoot and scoot along dirt tracks, melt into villages that were there before any flag. This was the moment everything changed. When the tools got cheaper than the targets, the strait didn't move, the headlands didn't grow, the islands didn't shift, but the cost curve flipped. A drone that costs a compact car hunts a ship that costs a city block. Geography made the lane cruel, technology wrote the policy. And down on the bridge, a helmsman waits for the next turn, knowing the map isn't neutral. It never was. The new arsenal of denial. Hardware got cheap, consequences didn't. That's the equation running the Red Sea now, low-cost tools that generate high-cost outcomes. A drone that costs a few used cars forces a ship owner to rethink a $150 million hull. Swarm math beats escort math because saturation is policy. You don't need a silver bullet, you need a busy sky. Start with drones, the one-way kind built to spend themselves. They cruise low, skim sea clutter, and follow heat and wake like fishermen once followed birds to find tuna. Individually, they're noisy, fallible, beatable. Together, they overwhelm. An escort can track a handful. A swarm turns defense into triage. Shooters pick the fast movers. Spoofers jam the clumsy seekers. Something still leaks through. And remember, hit isn't required. A near miss diverts a convoy, adds hours, and spikes premiums. Markets price maybes. Anti-ship missiles do something subtler. They scare accountants. The launchers live inland and on trucks. Crews roll out under tarps, fire from a scrubby lot, and are gone before afterburners fade. Most shots won't score. That's not the metric. The metric is insurance language, shareholder calls, and charterers who don't want their brand on a burning deck. Even a thwarted attempt moves a price index. It's psychological warfare with steel. Here's where it gets interesting. Shore-launched one-way UAVs don't need perfect guidance. They need reliable cues. AIS broadcasts, even when spoofed or delayed, still outline a pattern. Passive receivers on ridgelines catch radar side lobes. Thermal cameras see exhaust plumes miles out. Stitch the feeds and you've built a poor man's kill web. The seeker just has to arrive near a known track when a ship is forced by draft to be there. Cheap seekers like near. Sea skimming paths are improvised. Operators fly low to hide in ground clutter, then pop briefly to reacquire. It's sloppy compared to a Navy's playbook. It doesn't matter. In confined water, geometry compensates. The lanes converge, the arcs are predictable, and ships telegraph their turns with rudder angles and speed changes. A drone doesn't need a human eye. It needs a rule: if plume, if wake, if radar bloom, close. Then there are mines, real and rumored. Steel in the water is only half the weapon. The other half is the whisper that steel might be in the water. Lay a few, scatter few fake casings, seed a telegram channel with grainy photos, and you've bought days of clearance work. Minesweeping is slow, loud, and scarce. Meanwhile, everyone else detours because nobody gets a bonus for being the first to test an unverified corridor. The fear premium costs more than the metal. Jamming rounds out the fog. Attackers throw noise across GPS bands and radar frequencies. Pilots see ghost echoes. AIS plots stutter, duplicate, or disappear. Ships go dark to hide and become suspect for hiding. Insurers hate fog. Adjusters write clauses that penalize any deviation from procedure, while jammers force deviations. It's a trap where compliance and survival pull in opposite directions, and either choice adds to the bill. Meanwhile, AIS games create theater. Spoofed positions show a ship loitering off a sensitive coast when the real hull is days away. DKs pop up to lure escorts. False hails mimic naval voices, ordering course changes to split formations. Each trick burns attention, the scarcest resource on a crowded bridge. And every time a captain hesitates, the attacker's timeline opens wider. All of this runs on supply lines that don't look like supply lines. Fuel and explosive filler move in jerry cans in the back of pickup trucks. Airframes arrive as spare parts through ports where inspectors balance rules and rent. Targeting data flows from cheap phones, rented satellites, and sympathetic fishermen who text when the big ones pass. The hardware is modular. Break it in the morning, and a cousin bolts another together by night. Now the key point: the arsenal is designed to move the market, not just the ship. Missiles spook reinsurers. Drones create delay. Mines manufacture bureaucracy. Jamming manufactures doubt. AIS theater manufactures headlines. Add them up and they manufacture surcharges that outlive the incident. Even as strikes ebb, the war risk line item lingers because risk memory fades slower than news cycles. Navies can kill launchers. They can't kill the math. Escorts add cost. Air patrols add cost. Clearance ops add cost. All necessary, none decisive. The attacker's bill stays low unless someone bombs the warehouse, interdicts the funding, or convinces the local fixer that tomorrow's fuel won't arrive. That's not sea control. That's systems control, and it happens onshore. So the arsenal isn't a list of weapons, it's a menu of pressure points. Use drones to shape routes, missiles to shape coverage, mines to shape time, jamming to shape decision-making, AIS games to shape narrative. The target isn't the hull, it's the spreadsheet. and the toll booth stands wherever the next cheap launch rail can be dragged into the dark.